I'm delighted that my next guest is my colleague, Nick Cater, former editor of the Weekend Australian and deputy editor of the Sunday Telegraph, a senior research officer with the Menzies Research Institute, and a colleague of mine who writes regularly now as a columnist in the Australian, which is something well worth looking out for every Monday because what he has to say is always very interesting. Welcome, Nick.
Pleased to be here again, David. It's becoming something of a habit. A good one at that.
Yes. And you and a party of colleagues from this platform have just come back from a very significant occasion in Walker. What was that all about?
Yeah, Walker has the misfortune to find itself slap in the middle of a renewable energy zone. These are things that Matt Keane drew on a whiteboard in Macquarie Street, put a big circle on the map and said, that's where we're going to put the renewable energy, which is terrible if you live there. And the town of Walker, it's a beautiful town, lovely community, very friendly, caring community, is about to be ringed by wind turbines, more than 300 of these things. It's a crying shame because it is beautiful country. There's some great farming land, very rich soils around there. But of course, the other thing about wind, as we know, is that they always put it on the tops of ridges. And these are the bits which have never been farmed. They were too hard to farm. So they've become little havens for koalas and greater gliders and all these cute little creatures which are on the endangered list. So it is completely the wrong place to put wind turbines. I can't actually think of a right place to put wind turbines, but this is the wrong place. And the people are fighting that. We had a very lively community meeting. About 150 people turned up to the local bowls club to make their voices known because they don't get heard normally, David, as you know. None of the mainstream media seem to care much at all about them. And when they do write about them, it's in very sort of snide, condescending terms. But they need to be listened to because they have rights like the rest of us, and this is a democracy.
The keenest electorates for wind turbines are the Teal electorates, which I happen to have been redistributed into one. And I think on their voting record, these are the silliest electorates in Australia. They were the ones who voted for the Politicians' Republic. These are the ones who returned the Teals. These are the ones who voted strongly for the apartheid voice in the Constitution. Something is wrong with these electorates. But just to tell us, just to give us a feeling about these wind turbines, in terms of a building in the capital city, how tall is the typical wind turbine?
We're talking about well over 200 metres tall for the new ones. And if you think that the Sydney Harbour Bridge, I think, is just about 50 metres from the sea level to the top, you can see, well, what you're talking about is a big thing. I should have had the figures to hand, really, but you're getting on for an Eiffel Tower there. These are very big. And then they've got the blades, which are 80 or even 100 metres long, which go even further up to the top. So they're visually very intrusive. They produce lots of low-frequency sound, which can affect some people living nearby very badly, can cause sickness, can cause headaches. And it's devastating for koalas, because koalas, I'm told, communicate at around about 10 hertz, which is a very sort of, it's deeper than a dog's growl, and it's below what we can actually, normal people can hear. But that is the sound that comes off wind turbines. So wind turbines, although most humans can barely hear them, some people can, that they are deafening to koalas. So the whole thing is nuts. Just on those Teal seats, David, it is worth reminding ourselves, it costs a bit of money to get elected to Parliament. All those Teal so-called independents, all of them were funded by a little consortium of business interests dominated by renewable energy. Mike Cannon-Brookes put money in, Simon Homer-Court put money in, and other people put money into electing those MPs who are almost entirely driven by renewables. So they are backed, but they are essentially the renewable energy candidates in Parliament. So we shouldn't be at all surprised that they want to see more windmills or that they hate nuclear. They're not going to support nuclear.
Now, in some of your travels around the country, you've discovered that there is a problem in getting rid of these wind turbines when they've reached the end of their life. Didn't you find out something on one of the properties in the north?
Yeah, and we've got footage of this. I don't know whether Charlie can show this when it goes out, but I found, or I was led to this dump in the middle of a forest in far north Queensland, near the town of Ravenshoe, and they've just worn out turbine blades, which I think come from a project which dates back to the early 2000s. They're no longer any good, so they've just dumped them and tried to bury them, because you can't do anything with them. They're useless, they can't be recycled. And the point there is that these things only last about 15 years, and then you've got to do something with them. There's something else going on as well, which I discovered recently from some engineers working on a project at Clark Creek in central Queensland, is that you need about a minimum 300 tonnes of concrete, probably more like 500 tonnes, as a base for these things. They've got to pour this massive quantity of concrete into the ground so that you can put up a 200-metre turbine tower. Apparently, when that turbine wears out in 15 or 20 years' time, you can't reuse the concrete because it's lost its structural strength. You want to put another turbine in, you've got to do the whole process again, another 300 to 500 tonnes of concrete. So, you know, this is hardly renewable energy as you and I would think of it, is it? It's not renewable. It's very, very expensive on resources.
Nick, could you remind us of in terms of city buildings and so on, the height of one of these wind turbines?
Well, let's go with a 7 megawatt wind turbine, because that's what Chris Bowen says we need. He says we need to build a 7 megawatt wind turbine every 18 hours between now and 2030. A 7 megawatt wind turbine, depending on the design, will be between 230 metres tall and 280. So what does that mean? Well, the harbour bridge from the water to the top of the arch is 143 metres. So we're talking about something at least 2/3 bigger than taller than the harbour bridge, almost twice as big. The Eiffel Tower is 300 metres. So you are getting on to about 3/4 or 2/3 the height of the Eiffel Tower. So these are not small by any means, and once you take, you know, we're talking about in the city, of course, the harbour bridge just fits in nicely, but if you put a structure that height in the middle of a wet sclerophyll forest, for instance, as they were proposing to do up at Chilumban in far north Queensland, it towers above the trees and it becomes a magnet for greater gliders and other birds that fly at that height. And you can imagine a greater glider is, I don't know, 2 kilograms in weight. You put that underneath a fast-moving 100-metre long blade, you know who's going to come off worse.
This is extraordinary. I don't think city people realise what really is being imposed on people and all sorts of life in the country. Now, you mentioned Chilumban. You had a great victory, did you not, in Chilumban?
Well, yeah, the people of Chilumban did. I heard about Chilumban probably this time last year, and I went up in July to look for myself. So Chilumban is a wet sclerophyll forest. It's right adjoining a World Heritage Area forest. You know, this is UNESCO licensed World Heritage Area. And the reason that wet sclerophyll forests in the tropics, in the highlands of the tropics up there on the Atherton Tableland, the reason why it's so important is it forms the buffer between the rainforests, which we know and love, and the plains to the south. So if you don't have that, then it eats away at the rainforest. It's vital that we maintain that land, and unbelievably, the proposal was there to put this massive wind turbine development right in the middle of this forest, and with all the associated roads and cabling and transmission and, you know, the lot. And so I went up to look for myself, and I was taken, a local Aboriginal guy, a member of the Durable tribe, Tommy, took me to the top of this ridge so we could look down. And you know, David, I had tears in my eyes. I could not believe it. This was some of the most beautiful country I'd ever seen, this thick forest of tropical trees with not a person in sight, not a building, you couldn't even see a track. And they were going to stick a turbine development right slap bang in the middle. I said to Tommy, you're joking. We've come to the wrong place. He said, no, this is it, Nick. They're going to put the turbines there. And it did bring tears to my eyes, I have to confess, David. I just couldn't believe that we could be so foolish. So I set about putting the shoulder to the wheel and making this a national issue, and that we managed to do. And then, fortunately, late on, some actual real green groups got involved, and they started telling the minister that she might want to put turbines somewhere else, but she couldn't put them there. And Tanya Plibersek finally did the right thing and turned this down on the basis of the nature was too valuable to destroy. But what we've done, this is the first time it's happened, the first time we've persuaded this minister to knock one of these back. And it's established the principle. You have to weigh up the supposed benefits of wind energy, and I struggle to see any benefits, but let's assume there are. You have to weigh those up against the actual damage to the actual landscape, to the reduction of biodiversity, to the destruction of koala habitat, and actually make a decision. Is this worth it in the long run? And now that principle is established, I want to see it applied right through the country, particularly up there in far north Queensland, where two other wind turbine developments are threatened with very close to the wet tropics.
I think that's very important, and this seems to be the first occasion in which they've actually applied a balancing test in relation to this. Nick, we've reached the end of our time, but I do want to thank you, and I'm sure the viewers would want to thank you for the signal contribution you are making, particularly through your column in The Australian and your visits to these places, to what is really significant in the maintenance of the quality of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you for everything you do on your wonderful show.
Thank you.